as many questions if I'm going to be kind of setting it up, even though I can have them save them towards the end where we all regroup and kind of, I don't know. Do you guys think that might be an effective way to carry on a workshop?
What is your workshop? Like,
So
what is the
So it's
basis of it?
effective communication and relationships. And so what I'm doing is I have the church building reserved for 2 nights, for 2 Saturdays, or 2 afternoons, and on a Saturday. And basically, I'm just going through a few different points from Gottman, John Lund, Chapman, kind of teaching in regards to what we can do to have better communications in relationships and marriages. And so at the beginning, I am having them kind of take I'm having them take a few questionnaires and kind of explain to them why it's important. And so I could do that and be upfront and keep them in one area for the whole, 2 hours with a short break. Or I'm thinking have just different TV setup going through each of those things for 10 minutes each, 5 to 10 minutes each lesson, and then regroup and go through my discussion questions and go through the stuff that I didn't get to do with them. And so I don't know.
What are you showing them?
So basically I'm showing them a little bit.
You have videos or something?
Yeah, I have videos. And then I was thinking of just recording as a presentation, just recording myself as if I was doing the workshop, but kind of more in a presentation where it's kind of like a video made up of a video of the 4 horsemen, and then having them go into one room, and if we're going to talk about the 5 love languages, have them pick up a sheet where they kind of go through the 5 languages and determine which one's their love language. And there's one on love maps. And so there's different activities that I want them to do, and I'm thinking I could just stand up there and kind of reiterate it, or I can have them move around. And I was thinking if I can get them to go to all 4 stations, then they get ice cream at the end while we're discussing or whatever. Does that make sense? Kind of encouraging people to go to all the different stations and learn the same thing. But I don't know if that's going to be effective. I'm kind of torn.
Yeah. The first thing I thought was, as long as you have the debrief at the end, that's probably the most important part. And I'm sure it could be really effective if that was the baseline. If they just watched 4 videos and then had that huge lesson debrief with lots of discussion, then that could work. But even ways to make it stronger, or ways to make it even stronger, would probably be, if I had to guess, having something that makes the video watching interactive. And so that could be just a piece of paper for each room that has questions to reflect on after they watch each video. But I don't know, if each video is giving pretty straightforward content, maybe that's not even necessary.
Right.
Well, but it could be the first time people hearing this stuff, so maybe it's not that straightforward.
Right. And what I'm thinking is, for the most part, I'm thinking that a lot of people, because I'm targeting a lot of members, in my ward, in my community, I think most of them have heard some of these things before. So really, I'm just making them kind of reevaluate where they're at and kind of have them focus. Basically, the goal is to have them focus on, 2 things that they want to improve on, because I'm sure they've heard this before, but it's kind of like a little push at the same time. So I know for each station, I have a different questionnaire that they'll fill out. And so that'll be good, because I have the love language one, I have the love map one, and just the 4, I have one for at each station. So I think that it might be good, because they'll actually get to reflect, and they're not just listening to me talking, because the videos will include funny clips, and then, it's not just going to be me talking the whole time. So I think that it could work, because it's a very unique way to present everything, but I'm just worried that I won't get enough discussion out of it.
I think with what you're saying you have planned, I think that would work. I don't know. I even like the idea of having them switch rooms. I like how you said it's more of a workshop feel, because then it kind of gives each topic its own vibe, its own theme, I guess. Just even changing rooms will help people remember, probably.
Okay.
I think it sounds good.
I just didn't have time. So like I have my lesson. I'm finishing my last lesson today before I submit it again. And so, well, she gave me an extension. And so I'm trying to figure out, like, I wanted to meet with her, but she was out of town. So I'm like, I'm really like conflicted whether I should just go lesson by lesson, just like a teacher, or make it a little bit more different. So just wanted to get your input. And it kind of went with chapter 6.
Nice. So should I say my 2 things, or Excel, do you want to do another thing, or just one?
I just had another discussion question. If you guys want me to, that way I can kind of finish mine. I was just reading a little. I read chapter 11. I don't know what. Well, I don't know which one you guys decided to read. I thought that one might be pretty interesting. And
I thought about that one too, but I ended up reading 10. But I wanted to read 11, so I'm excited to hear what you say.
Yeah, so it's just about like sexual education and how like there's kind of a constant, you know, change that's going on as time goes on, and so different morals of traditional families and whatnot. So I just came up with a question, or was thinking to myself, like, how can we plan to use our workshop to teach others who may have opposing views? I think that personally with my workshop, I might not encounter that, but I mean, I never know, because if I'm targeting people on my Facebook or whatever, I don't know who might show up. But I'm thinking, like, how can we kind of teach others who might not agree with what we agree in? And then I also thought, how can knowing this information help us in the future when our children are being taught differently? Because we're seeing a lot of changes in systems, and how I guess governments and state is now wanting to, like, different states are wanting to implement certain sexual education content in the schools. And so the chapter kind of talks a little bit about that. And so I just thought it would be interesting to hear what you guys thought.
Right. In growing up, we always had we had 2 different periods. Well, like 2 different, like in 7th and 8th grade, we had like sexual education in our school for like 1 semester, and then in high school we did again. And so I don't know. I always thought it was really good. I actually wanted to be like a sex ed teacher after taking those classes, because our sex ed teacher was so cool. And she like made everything so like she was so funny, because like I remember she would be like, sex is amazing, but after you're married. Like she always would be like, it's so important. She like really talked about like abstinence and stuff like that. And I feel like today, I don't know, I feel like today that won't be as common. I feel like it's going to be more common to just be like, nope, just use protection no matter what, and still like kind of push the agenda of like sex before marriage is fine. And so I don't know. I think whatever the states or whatever want to do, but I really think it depends on in the home, like what you're going to do like in the home, and talk to your kids about different things and what you guys are going to teach your kids. That's just kind of what I think about it. I don't know.
I also read that chapter, and it's really fun because it actually is going along with what I'm doing at work at my internship, because right now in Utah, there's a congressman who is going to actually, he does this like every 2 years, but he's going to propose a bill to change the sex education in Utah to what's called comprehensive sex ed, which right now it's abstinence only sex ed. Which so anyway, it was really great that this chapter came up, because I was like, oh, perfect, I have to research this anyway. So I learned that it's actually part of the school's purpose to like advocate for whatever curriculum they choose, which I was surprised by, because I thought schools really shouldn't be advocating for anything besides what's academically true. And as far as like the research goes with sex ed, it can kind of swing both ways. Because research is, well, it just swings both ways a lot. But anyway, that's beside the point. I was going to answer your first question, which was, how do you teach people that might not fundamentally believe the same thing as you? And I really do feel, even though I just dissed on research, I really do feel like research is kind of a common ground for most people. And so as I'm like finishing up my curriculum too, my little outline, I kept trying to almost avoid like as much church content as I could, even though I'm going to be teaching to pretty much all members, probably like a lot of you or a lot of people in our class. I mean, it's still important to me to be able to present things that are widely accepted, and let people kind of govern themselves. And I think that kind of earns students respect as you're talking to them. And so like mine is on finance and marriage. And one of the topics is either keeping separate finances or combining them. And even though church leaders have never explicitly said this, it's like pretty obvious to me that you should combine your finances with your spouse, and that just makes sense because you become one. But there's a lot of compelling research as to why keeping them separate works in specific types of marriages, and it's really just up to you to choose what type of marriage you want. Do you want one where you're more independent of each other, or do you want one where you rely on one another and where you do have fights about decision making and money? So yeah, that's what I didn't have much to say about your second question, but to your first question, I think research is a really good common ground for most people.
Sweet. Well, that's all I have.
Okay. So I can share my two. Let me pull up my stuff. All right. In the readings from week 5, I really liked to answer the question. It was, what ideas about teaching stood out to me? And the one that I really like, I don't know why I don't feel like I've heard of this before, but it was the fishbowl like concept. And I just thought, wow, that is such a good idea, especially to do with parents and teens. And there's not really, I really kind of wanted to incorporate that into my lesson plans or whatever, but mine is on how to cope with stress. And so it gives like different strategies for stress, and it explains stress and everything like that. But I wanted to use the fishbowl in some way. And so the only way I could think to use it was like, maybe what I could do is like, I don't know, kind of have like a role play of someone like having like a stressful day or something, and having like the people in the workshop watch it. But I didn't know. That was just something that stood out to me. Not that necessarily I'm going to use, but I really like that for like future. Like if I'm doing, especially if I'm ever going to be doing anything with parents and teens, I think that's like, I don't know. It would just be for like parents and teens be like, oh, wow, that's how my teen feels. Or, you know what I mean? So that was what I found interesting in week 5. And then, and the question that I answered. Oh, and then I've been having a hard time like with one of the questions, what can you do to invite the Spirit? And like, sometimes I forget that we're at a church school, or that, you know, like it's okay to have the like talk about gospel things in our workshops. Because I so often think, well, what if I wasn't like presenting to people who like weren't LDS or religious or anything, and I was just presenting? Wouldn't it be weird if I was just like, and you should pray all the time, and then the Holy Ghost will tell you what to say? People are like, what? What's the Holy Ghost? So anyway, I just thought like, what could I do to like invite the Spirit or the light of Christ, even if it's like, if I'm in like not a LDS setting, which I will be doing my workshops at a couple of different Tuesday nights for my ward. But anyway, so the things that I came up with were use stories that enlighten, and then of course as the leader of the group, come prepared. Listen and acknowledge what people are sharing. I could even play like uplifting music and show pictures, and then testify in my own way. Like I don't have to like testify and be like, oh, Jesus is real. Not like that, but just like testify of things that are going to benefit people in their life. And I think for anyone who was not baptized, we all have the light of Christ, and we're all enabled to like feel that, right? You don't necessarily have the Spirit with you always, but you do have like the light of Christ. And so that people who aren't LDS can feel that and can testify. Well, I know that they could feel the Spirit in that way. And so that's just a thought that I had about that. And because that is one thing I often wonder about. Like, I do have, for amazingly living here in Utah, I do have quite a few friends who aren't LDS who will probably be attending the workshop. And one of the sections of my workshop is how to apply gospel principles. And so I'm like, well, that's going to be so weird for them, but not really. They live in Utah. They know everything about Mormons, so who cares? And they're my friends. It'll be fine. But I just like have thought like, well, it'll be interesting. So those are the two things that kind of stood out to me in the readings and the two questions I had. I mean, I don't know. Do you guys have any suggestions on like how you would handle presenting to non-LDS people, and any thoughts about that?
I don't know if I have suggestions, but I did want, what came to mind when you said that. So I'm wanting to go into therapy. And so one thing I always thought was, how can I help others kind of therapeutically if I can't use, gospel doctrine at all? Because I remember I went to a therapist once growing up, and he would pull out the Book of Mormon and now I hear that that's not very good, but it was a private practice. He could do what he wanted. And to me, I was like, wow, that's actually really sweet. Because really I can teach people tools, but really until they humble themselves to a certain extent and kind of come to Christ, I don't know how many promises or, how well they're going to get if they kind of don't have that truth. And so I kind of struggled with that for a while. And I remember I was working for a counseling office, and the clinical director said, well, she's like, that's not like your job to teach them, she's like, basically all you have to do is to what their truths are. So I think that what you said about like having inspiring or like good, messages that are uplifting is probably the best you can do, because they might not believe what we do, like the exact truths that we do, but there is some truth that they have, the difference between right and wrong. And so you kind of had to like aid it to them and what you think is going to bring them closer to God without them really knowing it, because it's bringing them closer to a truth. So it's kind of like a weird way to think about, but I really I talked to a few therapists about it, and I don't know how they do it. I don't think I'm super far into my, studies yet, so where I know how they do it, but I thought it was really sweet that you don't have to straight out,
say it, but use enlightening.
Exactly.
Story.
And then also about the fishbowl, I really like that too. And I also was like, is it too late to put it into my lesson plan? Because I'm like, I was like, maybe, because I know I'm doing a little bit. I don't know if you've heard of, what's his name? Just totally lost his name. Mark Gungor. So he's like a motivational or like a marriage speaker, and he's really good. And he kind of says the same thing, like, sex is good at the right time with the right person, at the right place or whatever. And he's just really, really good about everything he says is super awesome. And he has a thing where he talks about why men and women are so different and how they kind of clash with communicating. And I was like, well, maybe I can do separate the men and the women kind of thing and kind of help them see outside the box. But I was like, I don't know, it might be too late to incorporate it, but I really liked it too. But that's it.
Cool. Okay, so I'll go. So I really liked reading about the principles of instruction, and I'll just list them off, and then I'll ask you guys to just share which one do you think is the most important. And it's hard because they're all important. But the first one is addressing problems that are relevant to the learner, or incorporating experience and knowledge base of the learner, as in asking for experiences they've already had or what they already know. Demonstrating new principles or ideas, helping the learners apply those new principles or ideas, or helping the learners take that new knowledge home and into their lives, which actually so when I answered that question, I thought well, the fifth and the fourth and the fifth kind of sound the same to me. And so that's what was most important to me. I think that helping learners incorporate the principles that they learned into their lives is really, really important, because everything up until that point is for naught if that's not what the outcome is. And I even felt like sometimes you can take subjects that are not relevant to someone and they're still interested in them. I don't know. There's been a couple times where I've gone to classes or workshops where I was like, well, this doesn't apply to me at all, but I end up walking away just kind of grateful that I have the knowledge and maybe able to apply it in a different sphere. So I don't know. Do you guys think, do you think there's another one of those principles that's more important, or do you agree with the fourth and the fifth?
I do agree with you, but I think when you were reading them off, the basing things on their experience, I think that's huge, because that's how people are going to relate, and that's how you're going to help people understand better, I feel like, because you could be like, well, look, remember when you had this experience, and then implementing the, like, you know, fourth and fifth, where it's like, so you're right. I think all of them are extremely important, but I do think basing things on people's experience is going to help them relate and connect better.
That's true. And that's one thing that I learned when I was an EFY counselor, because when they were training us, and I do this naturally, like if someone's teaching me a principle, I always think like, oh yeah, I've totally seen that in my own life. And that's because, I don't know, maybe I'm self-centered, but I always do that naturally. But when they were training us to teach teenagers, they said, they're not naturally making these connections. You should draw on them. And so it was always a habit of mine to say, like, have you guys ever had an experience where you've received a really specific prompting from the Holy Ghost, and then you let them think for a moment, and then you get them to think of something, and some share, and then you teach a principle about following the direction of the Holy Ghost? Because by that point, like you said, it's like, if you're not building on something they already have, then you're building on nothing and they won't remember.
Right.
So thanks for bringing that up.
And I think those are important, but the one that I thought, or I guess when you said it was the first one, the address the audience's needs, or because I think that it kind of goes hand in hand with those, just because if they don't realize what they need to improve or what they want to better, I feel like they might not care enough to sometimes do it. Especially I think when it comes to like relationships, if someone's very like, oh, well, we don't have those problems, or, you know, I think that sometimes you just have to understand what they need. Because I'm like, well, what if I'm teaching all these people that are LDS, they've received some kind of instruction, and they don't think that their marriage really has a problem? I have to kind of find a problem that they might relate to, I guess. I don't know. I just think I don't know. I have to realize that not everyone will be the same way I am and take it the same way I am, because not everyone's struggling in their marriage the same way everyone else is. So I kind of think that that is like the attention grabber right at the beginning, and it can make a difference between whether someone's going to listen to you or maybe not. So
cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yep. Maybe if it's not relevant to them, I can try and fish for a way to make it relevant to them. You're like, well, if you're not managing your money correctly, is your sister? Is your mom? I don't know. Just kidding. Okay, well, that's pretty much, I don't want to make our meeting go longer, so I'm good with that.
Okay.
perfect.
Yeah.
And then do I just post it to the discussion board?
Yeah, that's what I did last time.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Sorry, wait. Do we want to talk about next week, or when do we meet again? And then in 3 weeks, did
3
we
weeks.
decide? Or are we just going to text again and someone will say, "Hey, I'll do it"?
Yeah, let's text again, because I don't even know what it's going to be like. Because by that point, we should have already kind of like started our stuff, right?
Yeah.
Well-
No, do we still meet? I don't even know.
Yeah, we'll text.
Okay,
right.
sounds good.
All right,
Okay,
see you guys.
thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.